How many, before we get started, how many former Marines are in here? All right. So I'll talk a little bit about the Marine Corps. So if I tell any lies, you can catch me. And anybody familiar with the Beirut operation? Okay, everybody else, I know half of you were on active duty at that time. Okay, so this is going to bother Jim because this isn't on an Apple Mac. And I know you don't trust it. Let's see here.
I do.
Okay, so my focus is going to be, for the quick version of this, is in October 23rd of 1983, this building was demolished from the ground up. This was the Marine barracks in Beirut that each battalion successively occupied. It was on the airport property at Beirut International Airport. It used to be the FAA, the Lebanese FAA. Syrians have been in it for a while. I can't remember, but this is the way it was. It was already, all the glass was gone. Most of the stuff inside was gone. So that's unfortunately that's a before picture, and you can see some of the. Most of these are my photos. This is 2-6 vehicles. Let's see. I've already lost half of my equipment. Okay. Yeah, I got.
Do you want your pointer?
Yeah, this is a super pointer. I can knock the eye out of a hawk at 200 meters. None of this little sissy stuff. Okay. This is me. We got to have the I love you page. So I was commissioned in '77. I started out as an infantry officer, 0302. I moved into the intel field when intel became a unrestricted MOS in the Marine Corps. Up until that point, it had been a limited duty officer, LDO field. Warrant officers were the S2s. So I went to 19. I had an unusual job in Washington. I worked for legislative liaison. Then in '82, I moved to the intel field and went to Camp Lejeune. And then I went into the reserves in '83, and I moved into a civilian job. Just for you Army guys, you recognize this by any chance?
Airborne.
It was an airborne training. It's the class book you get when you come out. I went to airborne school in '74. This is me, Charlie 10. I'd been watching too many Audie Murphy movies. You know, I couldn't keep my helmet straight. Okay, so context. Beirut, Eastern Mediterranean, about the size of Connecticut. It shares a 375-mile border with Syria and a 50-mile border with Israel. And obviously this is a part of the world that's rife with instability. Population in '83 was 2.6 million, and this was the religious breakdown. Now, and this doesn't entirely tell the complete story, because in each of these there were a significant number of factions. Just like everywhere in the world, you got Sunnis and Shia in here. Christians, they were Maronite Christians, and the Druze are kind of sort of a sect within Islam. So it was a real mess, and the whole area was a mess, still is. So this was a chronology of the operation. I do this to show where I fit in. So 25 August '82, the Israelis had gone into Lebanon in June of '82 to eliminate the PLO. And the PLO we think of as a irregular force, but they actually had some conventional units, and they had infantry units. You saw in there, they had some anti-aircraft stuff. They had some tanks. So it was it was an irregular force, but they had a little bit of capability, and they were going back and forth across the border into northern Israel. So the Israelis said, "Hey, we're not having this." So they created an operation called Peace for Galilee. And the Israeli intent was to create a 40-kilometer buffer but in the southern part of Lebanon that they could control, so they would stop the infiltration and operations of the PLO into Israel. So that got to be a mess, and the U.S. government and international community said, okay, well, we've had enough of this. So in August, 25 August, the 1st Battalion landing, I'm going to use some Marine acronyms, so if I screw up, let me know. BLT is Battalion Landing Team. I'll show you what one of those is in a minute. The 1st BLT went ashore, and its mission was to evacuate the PLO. And at that point, the PLO had said, okay, we want to get out of here, but we can't get out of here because the Israelis are thumping us, so how about escorting us out? So they did. So that happened in 82. The operation lasted for about 15 days. The BLT went back aboard ship, pulled out, and left. 2 days later, the president of Lebanon was assassinated, and they had that massacre at Sabra and Shatila refugee camps. So Reagan said, okay, well, job's not done yet. So he put that battalion back in. And then over the next course of whatever this is, there's a couple different battalions went in there. This was a contingency mission, so Marine Corps really didn't have any assets that were queued up for this, so they kind of took them where they could. And in the Mediterranean, the Marine Corps always used to have a battalion afloat, and I'll show you that in a minute, as an amphibious ready group, and so they kind of stole those forces and put them in there. So I was the S2 for 2-6, 2nd Battalion, 6th Marines. So we went in February, and we came out in June. And while we were there, the big embassy bombing occurred, and then fortunately we were gone. But this was the biggest loss of Marines in one day, except I think maybe Hawaii City, I'm not sure. And when you step back, these were really the first vehicle-borne suicide bombings of the modern day, and attributed to radical Islam. Not recognized as such, but when you look back at history, that's essentially what they were. So I was the S2 here. A good friend of mine, Walt Wint, who you'll see was the S2 here, and Walt is not with us. So this is Beirut in '83. These are kind of real crappy photos, but let me just show you this. This is the Med. This is the shoreline. And Beirut in its day was a really nice city. There had been a lot of French influence there. They had a lot of French cuisine. They had French-looking architecture. It had been a nice city. The U.S. Embassy was up here along the water. It was a great location. This obviously is Beirut also. So the Marine Battalion went in down here at the airport. This is the Italians. This is the French. And I forgot where the Brits went. But anyway, I'm getting a little ahead of myself. Remember I said the U.S. went in to evacuate the PLO. They evacuated them from the port of Beirut. And after that mission was completed, the Marine Force left, and 10 days later they were back. But when they came back, they went down into the airport because this was a built-up area and it was not suitable for the battalion to deploy. So they went down here to the airport. And here's a joke, cartoon. I know you can't read it in the back. Okay, Marines were faced with Druze and Shia, Muslims being backed by the Syrians against the Christian phalangists. The Druze and Shias are divided among themselves, as are the Christians. The Israeli pullout is leaving a gap that the Lebanese army probably can't fill. And the PLO is creeping back in. Nobody likes us, and it's all preceded by 2,000 years of bloodshed. Any questions? And you probably can't see it, but the briefers, there's a bullet bouncing off of his helmet. And this guy, of course, has got a bullseye on his back. Okay, Beirut in 1983. This was the big guy. Remember Yasser Arafat died in 2004, but back in 1983, everybody knew Yasser Arafat. He was the leader of the PLO, and he was our nemesis. And this is what Beirut looked like. It had been demolished, first in the Lebanese Civil War, then when the Israelis came in, bombing the heck out of it like we saw in that YouTube video. So when we moved in, this was what Beirut looked like. So for you Navy guys, remember I'm going to try and give you as much context as I can. Who are the Navy guys? All right. No, you got to raise your hand. Don't be shy. I mean, I know how you feel, but don't be shy. Okay, so an amphibious ready group, there's always one in the Med, there's always one in the Pacific, and they consist of 5 vessels. So the Marine Amphibious Unit is spread across 5 vessels. So these are the 5 vessels that carried us to Beirut. This was an LPH, where all of the Mao's aircraft were. LPD, which was a flagship, an LSD. I'm bragging about the Marine Corps now. An LSD, you know, its back end sinks in the water and it can put landing craft in and out. An LST up on the beach and another LSD. So those 5 ships. And this is how we went ashore. So it's kind of the old days, right? It was an LCVP. This one, I can't remember why the heck it appears they're going out into the water, but it doesn't seem like they're going anywhere. I don't remember. And there's one of the ships. So this is what a Marine Amphibious Unit looked like in those days, because I'll keep talking about this and you probably should know. So a Marine Amphibious Unit, and where's my devil dog back there? If I get this wrong, let me know. What was your MOS, sir?
341.
There we go.
Mortars.
Mortars, yeah. Okay, well, you'd correct me. So there's a Mao headquarters. This is about 1,500 Marines and sailors, because we always had corpsmen in there, right? And the chaplain, and 1 or 2 others, I can't remember. So Mao headquarters, commanded by a colonel. The Air Combat Element, Ground, and Marine Service Support Group. So the Air Combat Element was a composite, so it was 53s. The Marine Corps' heavy lift helicopter. 46s, which is the twin engine troop transport primarily, yeah. Sea Cobras and Hueys. Now all of these were, I know a bunch of you guys are Vietnam guys, these were all around in the Vietnam era, right? Yeah, 53s, 46s. The Marine Corps never really thought much of the Huey. We never had a lot of them. I guess it's because they wanted to move a bunch of guys at the same time. And the 53, in terms of payload, is kind of like the Chinook. You know, the Chinook could haul a bunch of stuff, sling loaded. So that's what the 53 was able to do. I'll skip over. So the Marine Service and Support Group is all the, you know, the ash and trash. So motor transport, engineers, explosive ordnance, landing platoon, which is shore masters and things like that, maintenance platoon and supply platoon. Then the ground combat element, in our case it was Battalion Landing Team 26. That was Battalion Landing Team, includes an infantry battalion. So infantry battalion, I left off weapons company. So there's 3-letter companies and a weapons company. And then to make it a battalion landing team instead of just a battalion, they strap on some Amtracs, some 5 tanks, 5 tubes of 155 at the time, and then at that time the tows were around, and those were Jeep-mounted tows. And then for the Beirut stuff, they attached an interrogator translator team, an ANGLCO, which in the Marine Corps is Air and Naval Gunfire Liaison. So in this case, you know, we were on the beach. And then Force Reconnaissance is the Marine Corps' deep reconnaissance force. Not used here in an urban area like this. Okay, does that all make sense? Okay, so that's the context. This is what we want. Now in this case, all of these, when we went ashore, basically it was this, and some components of this. I think they added a couple. They added a preventive health unit on there so we wouldn't get sick drinking the water. These things all stayed on that LPH. That none of them ever came ashore. They came in to drop stuff off and then left. And our artillery didn't come ashore and our tanks didn't come ashore. They stayed out on the ships. But these guys were there. Okay, so this is me in Martyr Square. Martyr Square was the center of Beirut, heavily demolished. This is my good friend Walter Wendt. And one of the things that the S2 has is a sniper platoon. At the battalion level, an S2 has a sniper platoon they call stay platoon, surveillance and target acquisition. So honestly, I can't remember how many snipers I had. Do you remember? Were you in an infantry battalion? I guess so.
For the weapons.
Yeah. So how many snipers were in a stay platoon? I don't remember. 6 maybe? I mean, it wasn't dozens. It was probably about 6. And these guys, this was during Walt's turnover. This was my stay platoon sergeant, and this was a spotting scope, that this day. Now, in the Marine Corps, remember, in 1982, we were basically the Vietnam Marine Corps. We hadn't really, it was like 7 years, right? We hadn't really evolved. We wore the same uniforms, helmets, soft body armor. We're same TO, basically, same number of guys in a rifle platoon. Individual and crew served weapons were the same, M60s, 60 mortars and 81 mortars, same uniforms, same Prick 77s, same M51 Jeeps, and the same tactics, 2 up, 1 back, right? So nothing had really changed. So here's the problem. When we went into Beirut, with the first group that went in to evacuate the PLO. The second group that went in, kind of like go in. We didn't really have a clear mission. We weren't occupying and holding terrain. We weren't. The best that anybody could say is we were a show of presence. That's what they called it. Now, what does that mean? Well, you're there. Okay, well, what does that mean? Well, you're there. Are we a show of force? No. You're not there for military action. You're a show of presence. If you're show of force, you're running around, locked and loaded and ready to go. You know what our rules of engagement were? Magazine out, no rounds in the chamber. Okay, so we were just walking around. Targets. So I showed you earlier the French and the Italians. This was my French counterpart, Captain Jean Elard, very nice guy. And this was my Italian counterpart, whose name I won't be able to mention in 100 years. And I don't know whatever happened to the Brits, because I didn't have much photos of them. I think they must have been up to, I've completely forgotten, they must have been up to the northeast. What'd I do? This thing's flashing. So when we went ashore, we did the best we could. We ate sea rats all the time. About halfway through, the Navy's guys started sending 1 meal a day in vat cans, hot chow. We had a gym. We put in a gym in the bottom of that building that was about to get destroyed. And you can see, this is the building, inside the building and the atrium. The atrium was one of the problems when it exploded, because it was a great big open space, and then it just came down. So, and you'll see here, these are windows, but they don't have any glass in them, and there's really no lights. We had a mess night there, go figure, Marines. And it wasn't the Marine Corps birthday, so I don't remember why it was we had a mess night. So just some miscellaneous pictures. A French soldier on patrol, great smile. The Italians had a kind of like it wasn't a museum, but they had a bunch of unexploded ordnance and stuff that they kept, mines. All during this time, there's what they call shuttle diplomacy going on. So there were Philip Habib, I think, was the U.S. ambassador to try and sort this stuff all out. He kept going back and forth between Beirut and Cyprus. Remember Cyprus? That's where he had a hotel. He wasn't going to overnight in Beirut. And maps, and I'll be the first to admit, the S2s back in 1982-83, we had a couple jobs. Hand out the maps. Keep track of who in the battalion had language skills, run the stay platoon, and really not much more. And report significant activities. So when you had a when the battalion had its daily operational meeting and you went around the table, the two would talk about what happened in the last 24 hours. But that's what the two was doing back in those days.
Space bar?
Space bar, yeah. So this is it. M51 Jeeps driving around. This was a later battalion because I know this lad has got his magazine in. But this was it, driving around Beirut in M51s. 4 guys to a vehicle. Show of presence. And then another cartoon. Look, I'll explain it once more. We're U.S. Marines defending PLO terrorists who are celebrating their victorious expulsion from Beirut. Now, what is so difficult to understand about that? Okay, Israeli Defense Force. Again, don't fool around. So when we got there, the IDF was still very active. You know, so they drove 113s. Look at all these guys. Merkava tanks. Merkavas, 113s dug in. So the Israelis, just a brief aside, you know, U.S. doctrine, at least in the Marine Corps, I don't know about the Army, we didn't really like to use tanks in cities. They were too easily obstructed, right? And lousy fields of fire, and all they were great big targets. We didn't want to do that. The Israelis, on the other hand, liked to use tanks in the cities. And they were just extra ammo, and they were just knocking stuff down. And on the other hand, they did not like using APCs. They thought they were too thin-skinned, and they didn't see any value in them. So in that way, the Israelis were interesting in the different way they operated.
Just say next.
Okay. Lebanese Armed Forces. Lebanese Armed Forces are a little bit like the Afghan National Army. Worthless. So, and I may come back and talk about the ANA later. You know, they're just, Lebanon didn't really have a military tradition. They would just conscript guys, give them minimal training. So here's the LAF guys. I ran into them one morning and they were out doing the double time. I don't know what they were doing. And I tried to look real close. Some of you gentlemen, I think they had FNs. I can't remember what they were carrying. Some of you gentlemen know firearms better than I do. This was one of their 113s in a sort of fighting position in the city, and another one. So Lebanese Armed Forces were no match for the Israelis. And they did everything, the Israelis did everything they wanted, and they were not in any way deterred by the LAF. But our rules of engagement said, we are here to support these guys. Just like we're in Afghanistan to support the ANA. That's why we didn't have our weapons loaded, because these are the guys that are pulling triggers. We are simply there to defend them, or to support them. Embassy bombing, Beirut. 63 people killed. Now, I think only about 18 of those were Americans, because every U.S. embassy has lots and lots of local nationals working in them, and all the admin positions. So the vehicle drove right into the front of that thing, exploded, and took the entire front side of it down. And interestingly, the cafeteria, because I'd been in there many times, the cafeteria was right in here when you went in the front entrance. So they drove smack into the middle of the cafeteria midday and took that whole building down. Now, and this is, I was here. What the Marines did at that point is we provided ground security. We were not substantially involved with State Department did the, I don't know, fixing it. They didn't fix it. Go ahead. Okay, now. So on the 23rd of October, remember, I'm going to back up now. So remember I said that the Marines were there from September 82 to February 84. And one of the reasons we left is what happened on 23rd October 83, where 241 Marines were killed in this building. So here's the problem. We had concertina wire around the building. and we really had no gates. We had a pole arm thing, and we had guard posts who had Marines standing at them with no magazine in and no rounds in the chamber. So we had, we had M60s up on the wall, we had sandbag, but the vehicle, the sentry, one of the Marines who had been on duty said that he saw this vehicle go back and forth in the parking lot. This is public parking. Back and forth in the parking lot. They were expecting a water truck that day because there's no running water anywhere. So that water truck comes in and drops water into bladders. They knew they were going to get a water truck that day, so the young gentleman, I think it was Lance Corporal, out there saw this truck driving by a couple times, and he said, "Must be the water truck." Well, obviously it wasn't the water truck. So he came in, he just crunched right over the concertina. It was a big, it was a big truck. It was filled with 12,000 pounds of PETN. I forget what that stands for. He just punched through. There was a gate with a pole. He punched through that. 2 guard posts on either side of the main entrance, drove in the entrance, and detonated. And the building just came down. Okay.
But this was after, again, the embassy bombing.
After the embassy bombing, yeah.
The idea of a suicide bomber.
Should not have been,
A surprise.
right, should not have been a surprise. And I remember I was there during the embassy bombing. And I will talk about that at the end. So this is what the building looked like. Obviously this is the following day when they were pulling people out. Unfortunately, these are body bags. George Bush showed up. And I think I had a picture. Did I have a picture of that Time magazine cover earlier? I don't remember if I did.
On the handout, there's
Oh yeah.
a picture of it.
The Time magazine cover is on the very bottom at the back. Carnage in Beirut. Yeah, I forgot I put these photos. And the one above, there were some survivors that came out of the building. In fact, the BLT commander was blown out of the building. He had been, I don't remember where his room was, but the explosion physically blew him out of the building. And he had significant injuries, but he's still alive, Lieutenant Colonel Garrity. Okay. My assessment. This is me. We had an unclear mission. We were not really prepared. When the 1st Battalion went across the, remember the 1st Battalion went in there in August. When they were told they needed to go in to evacuate the PLO, we call that a NEO, non-combatant evacuation operation. They studied frequent wind and urgent fury. One of them, I forget, one was evacuation of Saigon, I forget what the other one was. That's it. So we studied those old NEOs from areas that were not really analogous. We really had no intelligence or intelligence analysis. We had, I was the 2, remember, I was a captain in the battalion. The MAU 2 was a CWO2 who had been in the limited duty field. I think we had 1 top secret communication circuit, but everything else was secret level. We really had no intelligence coming in to us. And we had no idea of what was going on 100 meters outside our wire. And it was an urban area. The Marine Corps is not really good at operating in urban areas. We were never trained for that. And we had ridiculous rules of engagement, which I didn't put down here. I read somebody's report said, yeah, having a magazine out of your weapon's no big deal. How long does it take to slap your magazine in a weapon and pull the bolt back? Well, it takes a fair bit of time sometimes when a truck is bearing down on you at 50 miles an hour. So, so the ROE was messed up. It was a very confused tactical environment. There was all sorts of different ideologies. I didn't put it on here, but there was really no coordinating between us and the French and the Italians and the Brits. There was no coordination. We each had our areas of the city, and we each operated in our areas. I think you saw me. I went in and met with my counterparts, but I didn't have anything to share with them except what was going on in my zone, and they didn't have anything either. Very poor physical security. Now here's, Mike, this is your point. I know this is going to surprise you about Marines. We were overconfident. We just didn't. We looked at the Lebanese and we said, they're not a match for the U.S. Marines. And we drove around town with in open M151s. Nobody was going to bother us. Well, that was obviously wrong. And we did not recognize the deteriorating security situation. So it went from very benign. Yes, sir.
Didn't you guys have communication within the liaison office of the embassies for that intelligence? You gathered all those embassies?
You're looking at them. Because they were not authorized to share with us. And the military's point of connection is a defense attaché, not anybody else in the embassy.
Yeah,
And
basically the CIA working with
they wouldn't talk. I mean, no.
They wouldn't share
No.
information.
Yeah. And the defense attaché really didn't want to have anything to do with us.
Sounds like standard procedures, yeah.
Well, unfortunately, it was a huge.
Scale.
So we didn't have, and I don't remember what happened to the embassy actually after it blew up. That building was not occupiable, so I don't remember where they went. But State Department was going to keep an embassy there somewhere, but I don't remember where they went. So September '82. Evacuating PLO at the port in 6 bys, 5 at a time, to the water. They got on Greek freighters and sailed away. Relatively benign environment. We continued to operate in the city. Now at that point you'd hear small arms fire, but none of it was coming at us. And we just assumed it was sort of harassment, sort of pop, pop, pop. And then that started, and we got a couple of rockets when I was there, but they didn't hit anything. And it was a great big flat airport. But the embassy went up, and then my battalion left. Then when the next guys came in, they took mortars that were reasonably accurate. They had a couple of Marines killed on 2 occasions. And it just continued to get worse. And at the very end, the New Jersey, some of you guys might have heard this, the New Jersey pulled up and fired into the mountains. This was like in December of '83. So there's one thing, see if you can go backwards without getting too crazy. Okay, again, just to show how wacky this is. This road right over here is high ground, mountainous high ground, and this is us. And this is obviously, they got good observation, fields of fire, all down into the airport. We were concerned that this was a problem. And as I said, after we left the battalion, they were taking indirect fire from up here. Guess what this is? Well, you're not going to guess. This is called the Old Sidon Road, this thing right here. The Old Sidon Road was under the terms of the agreement, was still used by the Israelis as the main supply route, MSR. Because the Israelis were using this, we could not put people over here because it would look like the U.S. government was supporting the Israelis. defending the Israelis. So this was unoccupied by us. There might have been some Lebanese armed forces up there, I don't know. But this was, we could not go any farther than the Sidon Road. And then right here you got water. So it was not an ideal tactical situation. Let's see if we can go back to the end.
Tell me when to stop.
Just keep going. Anybody want to see any of these again? Nah.
So what is going on in
One more.
Lebanon now? I mean, we're here so
It's
much
still
with
a mess.
Syria, but
Lebanon, some people would say Lebanon is not really a country. It's the size of Connecticut. It's in the middle of all those big hostile countries. Sorry, I keep doing this. If you go back and look on the map, okay, so I think this is Tel Aviv right here. And Homs, Homs, is right in here. Homs is where Bashir Assad had that great big chemical weapons attack. Remember? And Damascus is right here. So it's not a hospitable area. And Lebanon is immensely factionalized. It's a country where the leadership is corrupt. They all have their own militias. The militias have their own militias. I mean, it's ridiculous. The only reason it's sort of its own country is because they've worked out some sort of...
was that one of the countries after World War I, the French?
The French, right. Yeah, you're right. So this had been French territory. That's why you get good food when the restaurants are still open. But yeah, it's kind of held together now because you say, okay, that's my neighborhood, stay out, and this is your neighborhood, stay out. And the Syrians, you're not going to do such and so. Anyway, other questions? Okay, go all the way back to the... And now at the same time this was happening.
Take it from here.
2 days later, Grenada. Remember Grenada? Now Grenada, there were 7,600 U.S. personnel involved.
Weren't we just protecting a bunch of...
Yeah, we're
medical
protecting a
students?
bunch of medical students because they had had a coup, Grenada was a big mess, but it was a multi-service effort. So the Marine Corps was there, the Army had a Ranger battalion or regiment or something. The Navy had their special underwater. Everybody was in on that one. Air Force had 130s flying in all the time.
So we had
A7.
justify joint operations. So.
In Grenada, yeah. But this was 2 days later, right? So think if you're sitting in the Pentagon and, Beirut blew up and you didn't have any idea what was going to happen, what was really going on there. And then 2 days later, you got 77, and remember Grenada's way the heck down here. You got 7,700 U.S. personnel engaged in Grenada to rescue some medical students or something.
Did we invade Panama after that? I mean,
I
that
don't-
came along sometime in that period.
Yeah, I don't remember. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anybody know about Panama? I don't know.
Yeah.
And I'm going to read this now. Hopefully I won't choke up because this does have some effect on me. So down in Jacksonville, North Carolina, there is a memorial. It's right outside the main gate, Camp Lejeune, if anybody's down there. I'd encourage you to go. On the wall here, the names of all the Marines that were killed, not just on that day, but it does not stand in Washington by others of its kind. It's in prominence and dignity with mission clear defined. It does not list the men who died, that tyranny should cease, but speaks in silent eloquence of those who came in peace. This other wall is solemn white and cut in simple lines, and it nestles in the splendor of the Carolina pines. And on this wall there are the names of men who once had gone in friendships named to offer aid to Beirut, Lebanon. They did not go as conquerors to bring a nation down, or for honor, or for glory, or for praises or renown. When they landed on that foreign shore, their only thought in mind was the safety of its people and the good of all mankind. Though they offered only friendship and freedom's holy breath, they were met with scorn and mockery and violence and death. So the story of their glory is not of battles fought, but of their love for freedom, which was so dearly bought. And their wall shall never stand forever, so long as freedom shines. Their wall shall stand forever, as long as freedom shines on the splendor and the glory of the Carolina Pines. Okay? So I hope that was informative. Anything else?
Question.
Did I lie? Anything? 0341? No? Was I okay?
Let's go, Fred.
Go ahead.
Okay. No, John, come on up.
Oh. What is this, a coin?
Yeah.
I didn't know you guys give coins.
There we go. But John, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, sir.
And this was fabulous. Now, I'd like to get John back here. I don't know what your schedule is, but I'm looking at July, and we can talk about that. But how about give everyone a little preview of your post-career, which got you into some interesting times too.
So after I left active duty, as you saw in '83, I went into the with the Foreign Service, and then went into corporate America. But then in 2007, I went back as a contractor inside State Department, and I went to Afghanistan twice a year between 2007 and 2018. It was very clear to me and I'm not a genius, it was very clear to me. In 2007, when I went in there, I was on the staff at ISAF, which was International Security Assistance Force, that nothing we did in Afghanistan was going to survive our departure. Absolutely nothing. And I was in Helmand Province down in the south in 2010 when President Obama had his surge. Remember the U.S. went up to 130,000 troops or something. And down in Helmand Province, the Marine put a brigade in there. Didn't go well. Anyway, and I sat in the brief as a State Department liaison. I sat in all General Mattis. Jim Mattis.
Yeah, Jim.
He was a BG. He was a one-star then, and it was his big brigade that went into Helmand. Nobody called it Mad Dog. I don't know where that came from. No Lance Corporals are saying, "Sir, hey, Mad Dog." No. Anyway, so I got lots of pictures and lots of thoughts on Afghanistan.
Yeah, well, we definitely
At your
would love to get
convenience.
you back for that. So again, thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.
And I hope all of you will stick around, talk with John some more, and visit around the museum, help us with our donuts and stuff in the back there.